Hey everyone, and welcome to this Vintage Car Chronicles special deep dive. And for this one, we're going to be diving into the Hummer H1. You can find this deep dive and all of our other episodes on Spotify.
The Hummer H1?
Yeah.
I mean, what a story, right?
Yeah.
Like from the battlefield to the boulevard?
Yeah, a real symbol of America.
Absolutely.
And we got a whole bunch of different sources that we're going to be looking at for this.
Yeah, articles and specs and historical data, all that good stuff. Even some fun facts.
Fun facts, yeah.
Yeah, you bet.
So we're going to try to figure out, how did this military vehicle end up on the streets?
Right.
What made it such an off-road beast? Like, what were the limitations?
Yeah.
How did it become such a cultural icon?
That's a good question.
And then ultimately what led to its demise? And then maybe the biggest twist, like, how did this gas guzzler make a comeback as an electric vehicle?
Totally. So we're going to cover it all.
Yeah.
Everything.
All right. So let's set the stage. Okay. So think early 90s. We've got this military workhorse. The Humvee bursts onto the scene during Desert Storm.
Right.
Everybody sees it. They're like, wow, look at that thing. And
it was everywhere,
Yeah.
in the nude, all over the place.
and who takes notice? None other than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Of course.
You might be thinking, like, what does the Terminator want with a military vehicle?
Right. What's he going to do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But here's where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the looks he was drawn to the power.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
remember, this is the era of bigger is better, right?
Exactly.
Arnold was all about pushing boundaries.
Totally.
So he actually lobbied AM General, the Humvee's manufacturer,
Okay.
to create a civilian version.
Wow.
And that, my friend, is how the Hummer H1 was born.
The birth of a legend.
There you go.
And, I mean, talk about making an entrance, right?
Oh, yeah.
He had Terminator emblazoned on the side of his first one.
No kidding.
Hey,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Not exactly subtle, is it?
No, not at all, but
I mean, it perfectly captures the spirit of the time.
totally.
This wasn't just a car, it was a statement.
Yeah.
Right.
A statement.
Yeah.
So these early H1s, like, they weren't the luxurious behemoths that we see kind of cruising around today, right?
No, they were rough around the edges, man.
Yeah.
It was almost like they'd been airlifted straight from the battlefield.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
one journalist even described it as like putting a gorilla in a Brooks Brothers suit.
Okay, so powerful.
Powerful.
But not exactly elegant.
Not at all.
So what made this beast tick?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what gave it that legendary off-road capability?
Well, let's talk specs,
Okay.
but not just numbers on a page.
Okay.
Imagine yourself, okay, you're behind the wheel.
All right.
You're facing this terrain that would make a mountain goat nervous.
Okay.
You've got 16 inches of ground clearance,
What?
thanks to that military-grade independent suspension.
Wow.
This isn't just for show.
Right.
This is allowing you to clear obstacles that would stop most other vehicles in their tracks.
Yeah, I mean, you're just, like, gliding over everything.
Pretty much.
And then you've got those massive 37-inch tires.
Oh, yeah, those things are huge.
I mean, practically tractor tires.
They're basically tractor tires.
Yeah.
They're not just for looks, though, right?
Right.
Those tires, combined with geared hubs that provide incredible low-end torque, allow the H1 to just crawl over rocks and mud like it's nothing.
Really.
Yeah,
It just eats it up.
totally. And don't forget the central tire inflation system.
Well, yeah, what is that?
You could adjust tire pressure on the fly to optimize traction for whatever terrain you were tackling.
Wow, so you're like, in the driver's seat, you're like, all right, I need a little more.
Yep, more pressure here, less pressure there.
Wow,
It was amazing.
that's incredible.
This wasn't just a vehicle, man. This was a tank disguised as an SUV.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it was incredible.
So how did all that off-road prowess translate to, everyday driving?
Oh, yeah.
Was it just a bone-jarring, gas-guzzling nightmare on paved roads?
Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly designed for cruising down the boulevard.
Right.
The H1 was notoriously wide,
Okay.
which made navigating tight city streets a real challenge.
Yeah.
And forget about parallel parking.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Fuel economy, let's just say, wasn't a priority.
Right.
We're talking single-digit miles per gallon here.
Wow.
Yeah,
9 miles per gallon.
9 miles per gallon.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
I guess if you could afford an H1 in the first place, you weren't too concerned about filling up the tank, huh?
That's right. This wasn't a vehicle for the faint of heart or the light of wallet.
Right.
It was a statement, a symbol of individuality, and a willingness to embrace the unconventional.
Yeah, so it sounds like the H1 was more than just a vehicle.
Right.
It was a reflection of a particular moment in time,
Absolutely.
a cultural phenomena.
Yeah.
But how did it go from being this object of desire to, well, a bit of a pariah?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And It leads us right into the next chapter of the Hummer's story.
All right.
A chapter marked by rising fuel costs, growing environmental awareness, and a shifting cultural landscape.
It's like the world kind of turned against the Hummer, huh?
In a way, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, stay with us, Vintage Car Chronicle listeners, as we dive deeper into the rise and fall of the Hummer H1's popularity.
Welcome back, Vintage Car Chronicles listeners,
Yeah.
to our deep dive into the Hummer H1.
All right, so before the break, we were talking about how the H1 was more than just a vehicle. It was like a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, a reflection of America's, fascination with excess and individuality
Yeah.
in the late 90s and early 2000s.
It's like it perfectly captured that whole go big or go home mentality, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But then, like, we all know the world started to change.
Right.
Fuel prices went up.
Yeah, skyrocketed.
Concerns about climate change became impossible to ignore.
Yeah, you couldn't avoid it anymore.
And suddenly that gas-guzzling behemoth started to look...
Irresponsible,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah, it's fascinating how perceptions can shift so dramatically, isn't it?
Crazy.
It went from like a symbol of power and freedom to being seen as a bit of a dinosaur.
Yeah, a relic of the past.
Yeah.
And remember, this was a time when hybrid cars were just starting to emerge.
Right.
And the Hummers, 9 miles per gallon fuel economy
9 miles per gallon.
suddenly felt like a slap in the face to Mother Nature.
Yeah, ouch.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the environmental concerns, right?
Yeah.
The economic landscape was changing too.
Yeah.
The Great Recession hit in 2008,
Oh, yeah.
and suddenly that ostentatious display of wealth that the H1 represented just felt really out of touch.
Yeah, people were tightening their belts, downsizing, and the Hummer with its, massive size
Yeah.
and even bigger price tag became a symbol of a bygone era,
Right.
a time of, carefree spending and conspicuous consumption.
It's almost like it became a victim of its own success, right?
I think so.
It was so closely associated with that bigger is better mentality that when the world kind of shifted towards a more sustainable, less is more approach,
Right.
the Hummer just couldn't keep up.
Yeah, it was too much.
Yeah.
It was too big, too heavy, too thirsty.
It was to everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a classic case of a brand being overtaken by cultural change.
It really is.
And for a while, it seemed like the Hummer brand was destined for the automotive graveyard.
Right.
Just a relic of a time when gas was cheap and SUVs ruled the road.
It was over.
But then something unexpected happened.
Oh, yeah.
The Hummer name was resurrected,
It's back.
not as a gas-guzzling monster,
Yeah.
but as an electric vehicle.
Who would have thought?
What?
Right.
I mean, who could have predicted that?
Nobody.
But it makes you wonder, can the Hummer EV really shake off the baggage of its past?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can it transform its image from gas guzzler to eco-warrior?
It's a bold move.
It is.
There's no doubt about that, and it speaks to the power of reinvention.
Yeah, the ability to adapt to changing times.
Right.
The Hummer EV, I mean, it's a technological marvel
Yeah.
with its, 1,000 horsepower electric motor,
1,000 horsepower.
350-mile range.
Yeah.
The ability to go from 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds.
It's a beast.
It's insane.
Yeah. But can it win over the hearts and minds of a public that's become increasingly skeptical of large, powerful vehicles?
I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a gamble for sure.
It is a gamble.
But there's no denying that the Hummer EV has generated a lot of buzz, right?
It has.
People are curious,
Yeah, they want to know more.
intrigued by the idea of an electric Hummer.
Right.
But whether that translates into long-term success, well, only time will tell.
Only time will tell.
It's a fascinating case study, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
The Hummer, in all its iterations, has always been a lightning rod for attention, both positive and negative.
Yeah, it's always been controversial.
Yeah, and its evolution reflects the changing values and aspirations of American society.
It really does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we get too caught up in the future of the Hummer,
Okay.
let's take a closer look at the H1's technical achievements.
Right. Let's do it.
Like, what were the engineering feats that made it such an off-road icon?
Yeah, what made it so special?
And what were some of the compromises that came with that capability?
Yeah, what were the trade-offs?
We'll delve into those questions right after this. All right, and we're back with our deep dive into the Hummer H1 Vintage Car Chronicles listeners on Spotify.
All right.
So we've talked about, its journey from military roots
Yeah.
to pop culture icon and to electric innovator, believe it or not.
That's right.
But before we wrap things up, I think it's time we really geek out on, like, what made the original H1 such an off-road legend.
Yeah, let's go under the hood, so to speak.
All right, so for our listeners who maybe aren't, like, hardcore off-roaders,
Yeah.
what kind of features are we talking about here? Like, what
Right.
set the H1 apart from, your average 4x4 pickup truck?
Okay, well, think about ground clearance for starters. I mean, we're not talking a couple extra inches here.
Okay.
The H1 boasted a whopping 16 inches of ground clearance right out of the factory.
16 inches.
16 inches.
That's like almost up to my knee.
It's a lot.
I can only imagine what that must have felt like, just towering over everything else on the road.
Oh, yeah, you're looking down on everybody.
And it wasn't just for show, right?
No, it wasn't just for looks.
Like that kind of clearance combined with that, like, beefy suspension system
Yeah, that military-grade independent suspension.
meant that the H1 could just climb over obstacles that would leave most other vehicles stranded.
Basically. And then you've got those tires.
Oh, yeah, the tires.
I mean, those things were massive.
They weren't just big, they were monstrous.
Yeah, 37-inch tires.
That's crazy.
And they weren't just for looks either.
Well,
They provided incredible traction, especially when you combine them with the H1's geared hubs,
Okay.
which allowed for extra torque at low speeds.
So you can just crawl right over anything.
You could practically climb a wall with this thing.
And the central tire inflation system. I mean, that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right?
You could adjust your tire pressure from the driver's seat?
Exactly. It was a game changer for off-roading.
That's wild.
You could air down your tires for better grip on soft surfaces, like sand or mud,
Okay.
and then air them back up when you hit the pavement.
Wow.
It gave you incredible versatility and control.
So the H1 was like this ultimate off-road machine, but let's be honest.
Yeah.
There had to be some downsides.
There were a few.
I mean, driving a tank around town can't be all sunshine and roses.
Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly known for its nimble handling
Right.
or fuel efficiency.
Yeah, the H1 was notoriously wide, making it a challenge to navigate those tight city streets.
Forget about parallel parking,
Oh, yeah, forget about it.
unless you had a team of engineers to guide you in.
And the fuel economy.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned it earlier, but it's worth repeating.
It's pretty bad.
9 miles per gallon.
9 miles per gallon.
That's almost impressive in its own right.
It's a feat of engineering.
So it sounds like you had to be pretty committed to the H1 lifestyle
You did.
to put up with those quirks.
It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a commitment.
Yeah. And, it's fascinating how that same spirit, that sense of adventure
Yeah.
and unconventionality is being carried forward in the Hummer EV.
I think so too.
It might be electric,
Right.
but it's still pushing boundaries
Absolutely.
and challenging perceptions.
It's a whole new chapter.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Hummer H1, I think it's safe to say that this is a vehicle that has left like an undeniable mark
Yeah.
on automotive history. It's been a symbol of excess,
For sure.
a target of criticism,
Yeah.
and now a pioneer in the electric revolution.
The Hummer's come a long way.
What a wild ride.
It really has.
Huge thank you to all of our Vintage Car Chronicles listeners on Spotify for joining us on this special deep dive into the world of the Hummer H1.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Don't forget to tune in tomorrow for a brand new episode.
We'll see you then.
We'll be exploring another captivating chapter in automotive history. So buckle up and get ready for another exciting ride. Until next time,